Hey everyone, today we are going to talk about one of the most important feature of object-oriented programming, which is inheritance. We are at a point where we can take our object-oriented programming skills to the next level. In general, when we talk about the system design, we should avoid repetition of the code. We already saw how functions allow us to contain reusable code in easy-to-use functions. We also saw higher-level modular programming using modules and packages, which allow us to separate large chunks of code from single file to multiple smaller files. In object-oriented programming, classes provide flexibility to separate our code into separate classes. These classes are responsible for one specific task. When we come across a problem in one section of the code, we have to deal with a specific class or a group of classes. We don't need to search for a function in a large file with thousands of lines of code. It would be very tedious to scavenge for a function in a single monolithic file. Each Python class can be created as a separate file or a separate module with related classes in the same module. Let's clean up our code from the person class. Remove this print class name method. Now we want to create new employee class which inherits from the person class we had created. So let's define a class employee. If we want to inherit from a specific class, we can write that class name in the pair of parentheses. If we don't specify anything in the parentheses, for example, in our person class we didn't specify anything, Python automatically inherits from the object class. So even if you don't mention anything, they extend or inherits from the Python superclass, which is object. In our case, we want to inherit from the person class, so we can pass person class name here. This inheritance creates parent-child relationship between these two classes. Here person is called a superclass or a parent class, and employee class is called the subclass or child class of person. We can say employee extends person or employee inherits from the person class. The cool thing about inheritance is that it inherits all the methods and properties from the parent classes as long as it doesn't have name conflict. If there is a name conflict, then there will be another scenario which we will talk about in later videos. Let's simply make this class compile by writing pass. Now, when I try creating this employee object, emp equals employee, without passing any argument to the constructor, it errors out with a message that it's missing one required positional argument, name. This sounds familiar if you have watched my previous videos. Basically, it inherits the dunder init method from the parent class, which in this case is the person class. Our person class expects this required argument name, and that's what this error refers to. Let's pass Patrick as a name. This employee class not only inherits the init method, but it also inherits all the methods defined inside the person class. So now for this employee, we can call employee.describe. And if I execute this code, it compiles fine and prints the message for this employee. We don't have to define a describe method again in this class. We can simply inherit this method from the class which has this method, and then we can simply reuse that method. If we explicitly define _init method in the employee class, we have to pass the same arguments as the parent class. So let's pass name, age, with a default value of 20 and keyword arguments. And inside the method, we can copy this code from the person class to initialize name and age properties of an employee. And for quarks, we can iterate through it and assign the attributes using key and values. Let's execute the code and see. It prints Patrick is 20 years old. If you look at this piece of code, it looks the same as the parent class constructor. To avoid this repetition of the code, we can simply use the parent class init method. For that, we have to call super, this is a special keyword in Python, dot _init method with the arguments that superclass init method takes. It takes name, age. Let's remove this assignment from here, and if I execute this file, it works perfectly fine. If the only thing we can do is inherit the methods from the parent class, then this class will be of no use. We can also add attributes to our subclasses. In real life, children can have characteristics of parents, but they can also evolve and develop new skills. The same holds true in object-oriented programming. Our employee class can have additional attributes and behaviors which the parent class doesn't have. Suppose that each employee can have one employer. We can add argument employer to our init method. In reality, employee can have many employers, and we can represent that using list or dictionary. But in this simple example, let's keep it as string. In the init method, add the argument employer and initialize it after the super method call. It will first initialize the name and age from the parent class init method, and then the execution flow comes back on this line. Here we initialize employer, and finally we will have the employee object created. We already know that the default arguments should come at the end of the argument list. Here we have this age variable with a default value in the middle of the argument list, so it will throw syntax error if executed. We can either provide default value of none to our employer or remove this default value from the age variable in the parent class init method. Every person may have different age, so it makes sense to remove this default value of age argument. With these changes, we will have to provide the age value explicitly. So let's say Patrick is 23 years old and his employer is ABC Corporation. If I execute this code file, it works perfectly fine. It prints this message, I am Patrick and I am 23 years old. So that's how you can inherit properties and methods from the superclass. I hope this video was informative for you. If you found it useful, please like, subscribe and comment on it. In the next video, we will talk about other features of object-oriented programming in Python. So keep watching and keep learning.